Let's turn, though, to a fascinating story because scientists have discovered a gigantic ring-shaped structure in space which is so big it challenges our understanding of the universe. Experts at the University of Central Lancashire say it's 1.3 billion light years in diameter and appears to be roughly 15 times the size of the moon as seen from Earth. Structures that big shouldn't exist, according to one of the guiding principles of astronomy. Well, I'm delighted to say let's speak to Alexia Lopez, the PhD student at the University of Central Lancashire who identified what is being called the Big Ring. You are smiling broadly. I'm not surprised. I mean, what does it feel like making a discovery like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It is surreal. We stumble across these discoveries accidentally, so it's so fun to be able to, write up analysis on these kind of discoveries. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Now, my brain is clearly smaller than yours, so you better just explain in simple terms what you've actually discovered.
So I've discovered a really massive structure in the universe. So these are the biggest things in our universe. So it's made up of galaxies and galaxy clusters, and it creates this really big ring shape.
And how did you find that? Because it's pretty obvious nobody else has stumbled across this. So how did you actually do it?
Yeah, so I was using a relatively unique tool to find this large scale structure. So the method uses these really bright sources of light known as quasars. And then when we measure the light from these quasars, it can tell us about things that are in between the quasar and us. So when I measured, I use all these quasar spectra. And so it tells us about all these intervening systems. So it tells us about where these galaxies are. So you can imagine it's kind of like looking at bright spotlights in a dark room. So the spotlights are highlighting to us where all these galaxies and galaxy clusters are. So without the bright spotlights, without the quasars, we would usually not be able to see these galaxies and galaxy clusters.
So that's how you did it. Just again, in simple terms, explain why it challenges what we thought we knew.
Well, in order to make the mathematics simple, to model our universe, we make some assumptions. And one of those assumptions is that on large scales, we should see that the universe and the matter distribution in the universe looks smooth everywhere. So this essentially puts this limit on how big we should find structures existing. So when we find these large scale structures, these huge large scale structures like the Big Ring or the giant arc, these are so big that we're now not seeing this statistical homogeneity. We're not seeing this smoothness in the universe. So it does challenge this cosmological principle. It challenges our founding assumptions on what the standard model is built on.
So if those absolutely basics that we thought we knew aren't necessarily what is actually the truth, what sort of questions then get thrown up?
Well, I mean, this is the biggest question. What do we do now? Really, we need to start thinking about if we should be using alternative models of cosmology. So these are proposed by lots of different people, including a Nobel Prize winner, Roger Penrose. So he has his alternative theory of cosmology, which actually you would detect circular features in the sky, in the CMB sky. So maybe it means we need to start really taking these alternative theories in cosmology seriously, and also seriously be questioning whether our standard model can hold if the basic assumptions are proving to be challenged. Fun to be able to, write up analysis on these kind of discoveries. So yeah.
Okay, first thing I want to say is how do students find all these big discoveries, right? Aren't the the smart tenured professors or somebody supposed to find this stuff out? Like, what about real scientists? How can we get all these breakthroughs, right? How many more breakthroughs do we need to have where you have a random astronomer? I did this in my free time, right? I did this in my free time and found some huge giant breakthrough, okay? Because they can't imagine that it goes against all of their current theories, and yet here we are yet again, right? And yet again, we'll be surprised that they may have to look at their standard model of the universe, but they don't, right? They don't. Let's see.
It's really exciting.
Now, my brain is clearly smaller than yours, so you better just explain in simple terms what you've actually discovered.
So I've discovered a really massive structure in the universe. So these are the biggest things in our universe. So to see these galaxies and galaxy clusters.
Okay, so yeah, basically she just looked. She looked, and it was like looking at spotlights in the dark. It's a good reference for us, a good analogy for our humanity. And then she'll give a good point here, is that these structures are in order where we're not expecting order. That's why they're surprised, right? She'll say this in a second. But the reason they're surprised by this giant structure, we're going to continue to find giant structures that don't make sense, right? Because if it's 1.3 billion light years in diameter, that means it could not have formed, right? It's too big to have formed with all of the current understanding that we have about how all these things form. Like, none of it makes sense in any of our models, right? This should not exist. And the reason is that she'll explain here in a second is what is our mainstream understanding of the greater cosmos is that it's all the same, right? It's all uniform. And that's the exact same thing. That's the exact same thing they thought when they were looking down into the microscopic world. If you remember, the assumption was uniformity. When I look down into a microscope, all I'm expecting to see is like maybe the structure of the wood, right, in little cells. You're not expecting to see order where you have actually these other little organisms running around. That was the big thing, right? It wasn't uniform. The structure was not uniform at the smaller levels. Because why? Because of microscopic life. That's what we found. So what I'm saying, and what I've been saying for the last 2 years now, is that this is microscopic life. What we're looking up now is we're going to find these larger structures that, I know it sounds insane, but microscopic life, I'm sure, sounded insane to everyone a few hundred years ago. And look what happens, right? We do have microscopic life. And it is crazy and it is insane, right, that we have microscopic life. Okay. All I'm saying is, don't stop at us. We're definitely not the smartest and highly evolved thing in this universe. I promise you, we are not. So if you don't stop at us, then you keep going, chances are these large structures, and we're just going to continue to find larger and larger structures. And I would just love it one day if anyone even considers that maybe this could be life, like any of this thing could actually be some form of life. So here she'll say it.
Yes.
So that's how you did it. Just again, in simple terms, explain.
Model can hold if the basic assumptions are proving to be challenged.
Yes, thank you. Oh my God, that's like, is that rocket science? Is that some unreasonable request to our scientists? I mean, you heard it there. She's like, maybe they should look at some other alternate theories, since our current theories have been wrong for 40 years. We still haven't found dark matter. We still haven't found dark energy. They're out there just like looking in the dark. They want a bigger collider. They want a bigger, large hadron collider. And if you go back and look at the Higgs boson, this amazing discovery, right, where you had all these, nerds giving themselves millions of dollars and all these awards, and man, you really did it. Nobel Prize. You've broken the bank. What's come of that? The Higgs boson. What's the percentage? They can't even prove that that's actually, wasn't that the point? The point was to find the Higgs boson, and that would prove that the Higgs boson is where this touches into that. And so our whole universe can then be described. No, that's not what happened, right? And yet they want a bigger collider. If they get a bigger collider, they'll figure it out. There's even recent arguments that black holes actually don't exist, right? That there aren't black holes. It's not a black hole, which you're actually looking at. It's something else. Not the way we think of it, where it goes into this event horizon and it can never come out, right? The matter can never be accessed. What they're saying now is actually that's not the case. That's just a math singularity. So now black holes could actually not even exist. It is something else, right? You have to remember, guys, is we're on our planet, which we assume we can see everything really well, but we can't. Like the JWST, I was watching a show the other day. even with the James Webb Space Telescope, right? If you pointed it at the moon, you could not see where our astronaut, you could not make out the pixels, could not make out where the spacecraft are on the moon. I mean, it seems unreasonable to me, but at least with the Hubble. So with the Hubble, you definitely can't see it. So we just can't see out in the cosmos that well, right? And we have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, right, giving all these great, deep toned discussions about event horizon. When you're on the outside of the black hole, what happens? You'll be stretched. Okay, this is all made up BS. Okay, this is not legitimate. Like she mentioned, we need to go back to the assumptions. What are the assumptions of all of our science? And that assumption where you look up, that's really pretty important as you're an astronomer, and it's all uniform, not correct, right? And yet, I bet that's what they're teaching. All right.